My ex-wife and her lawyer boyfriend took everything: the company, cars, money, even my only child. Broke. I went to the bank with my grandpa's old card. The manager went pale. This account's been active since 1948. What I saw on the screen left me frozen. My name's Lucas Merritt, and I'm what happens when the American dream meets divorce court. 69 years old, retired, not by choice, and currently living in a studio apartment that smells like ramen and regret. Once upon a time, I was the CEO of Merritt Movers, the biggest logistics company east of the Mississippi. Started it myself. One rusty van, one back brace, and an unhealthy addiction to caffeine. I hustled my way up. Made deals in parking lots, slept in warehouses, ate enough gas station sandwiches to qualify for sainthood. By the time I turned 55, I had a fleet of trucks, an empire, and a wife who treated matching outfits as a sign of love. That was Clara, my ex-wife. Back then, she'd look at me like I'd hung the moon, or at least like I'd financed it. She'd say, "Lucas, you're gonna make it big someday." And she was right. Just didn't mention she'd stick around only until big came with commas. Once the money started rolling in, Clara upgraded faster than an iPhone. New hair, new friends, new attitude, and eventually a new man. His name? Julian Ward. The kind of lawyer who tans year-round and probably keeps his conscience in a lockbox. He showed up at one of our company charity galas. I remember because he introduced himself by saying, "You look taller on Forbes." That should have been my first clue. Within 6 months, Clara was volunteering at his firm. Within a year, she was filing for divorce. When I say she took everything, I mean everything. The house, the cars, the yacht she claimed made her seasick, all gone. The company we built together? Gone. Even my golf clubs, which she couldn't tell a putter from a plunger, disappeared. The judge looked me in the eye and said, "Mr. Merritt, you're left with 50% of the assets." Which apparently translates to 50% of nothing. But the real sucker punch? She took Caleb, our son, my boy, my pride, my disappointment. Clara fed him lies like vitamins. Your dad's unstable. Your dad's reckless. Your dad needs help. Okay, yes, I once threw a golf club through the TV when the Lakers blew a 25-point lead, but that was self-defense against heartbreak. You don't live through the Kobe years and come out emotionally balanced. So, after 3 decades of sweat equity and Sunday dinners, I ended up here, in a glorified shoebox of an apartment with flickering lights, creaky floors, and a landlord named Tito who thinks Wi-Fi is a government conspiracy. Tito's the kind of guy who smokes cigars the size of carrots and calls everyone chief. Every time I remind him the ceiling leaks, he squints like I'm describing advanced physics. It's part of the charm, he says. Charm? Buddy, if mold counts as charm, then this place is the Eiffel Tower of fungi. My furniture consists of one sagging couch, a coffee table that used to be a door, and a TV that gets more static than channels. Dinner? Usually ramen, sometimes cold pizza, always paired with existential dread. The fridge hums like it's plotting against me. The nights are the worst. You'd think at 69 I'd be used to silence. But when you've spent decades in boardrooms, surrounded by people begging for your approval, quiet feels like punishment. I'd stare at my ceiling, or rather, the patch of ceiling that hadn't yet collapsed, and think, is this what they mean by full circle? Because it felt like I'd gone from loading boxes in a van to being the box. My son stopped calling after the divorce. The last text he sent me said, "Mom says you need help." I wanted to reply, "Yeah," from a priest and a flamethrower, but figured it wouldn't help my case. The thing about losing everything is, you start to notice the small stuff. Like how your neighbor's dog never stops barking, or how the guy downstairs blasts EDM at 3 a.m. like he's auditioning for Coachella. That guy's name is Earl, retired bus driver, 73, wears tank tops year-round and calls me moneybags, even though my wallet's emptier than his beer can collection. Earl's the closest thing I have to a friend these days. Every morning he knocks on my door with 2 coffees from the gas station and unsolicited wisdom like, "Don't marry a woman who uses your Netflix profile." One night, after my 3rd straight dinner of noodles and regret, I found myself flipping through an old Merritt Movers binder I'd somehow kept. I don't know why. Nostalgia, masochism, or boredom. Between faded invoices and company Christmas photos, a green envelope slipped out. It was worn, sealed with old wax, and had my grandfather's name, Henry Merritt, scrawled in perfect cursive. Grandpa Henry was a legend. The man once drove cross-country during a blizzard just to deliver a piano. He started his own delivery service back in the 1940s. Didn't make it big, but he made it honest. When he died, he left me his pocket watch, a leather journal, and a lecture about protecting what matters. I assumed that was just his Depression-era way of saying, "Save your money, idiot." I opened the envelope. Inside was a yellowed note and an old bank card, the kind with no chip, no logo, just First National Trust embossed in fading letters. The note read, "For emergency use only. HM." I stared at it for a good 5 minutes. Emergency use only, huh? Well, Grandpa, if ramen dinners and emotional ruin don't qualify, I don't know what does. I laughed out loud, that weird, half-sane kind of laugh that echoes off the walls and makes your neighbors reconsider their life choices. Still, curiosity is a powerful drug. The next morning, I showered, shaved badly, and put on my least wrinkled shirt, the one that still smelled faintly of courtroom despair. I grabbed the old bank card and took a bus downtown to First National Trust, figuring maybe I'd find enough in there for groceries. $50 would have felt like Christmas. The teller, a young woman with pink hair and a nose ring, gave me that cautious smile people reserve for senior citizens who might forget where they are mid-sentence. I handed her the card. "Can you check the balance on this account?" She typed, frowned, typed again, and then called for her manager. That's never a good sign. Out came Mr. Lowell, thin, balding, looked like he broke out in hives at the word conflict. He glanced at the card, blinked twice, and said, "Sir, this account has been active since 1948. I squinted. Yeah, Grandpa opened it. He typed a few more things, then his face went pale. "Sir, you might want to sit down." My heart started doing jumping jacks. Why? Did the account bounce? He turned the screen toward me, and there it was, a number so big it looked fake. $143,902,876.47. I blinked. Twice. Maybe 3 times. I laughed, because that's what you do when life kicks you in the teeth and then hands you a gold tooth. "You sure that's not someone else's account?" Mr. Lowell shook his head. "No, sir. It's yours. There's a note on file authorizing transfer only to Lucas Merritt, verified by ID." For a second, I genuinely thought I was hallucinating. Like maybe Tito's mold problem had finally evolved into a hallucinogen. I rubbed my eyes. The number didn't move. $143 million. From a man who used to save pocket change in coffee cans. I felt lightheaded, like the air suddenly had too much oxygen. Mr. Lowell leaned in. "Sir, are you okay?" I grinned. "No, I'm great. Just wondering if you sell oxygen tanks, because I might need one." He laughed nervously, probably wondering if he should call security or an ambulance. I left that bank with a new account number, a secret bigger than my ego, and the weirdest feeling, like life had just pulled the ultimate plot twist. For years, I thought I'd lost everything. Turns out, Grandpa had been quietly letting compound interest do its magic while I was busy losing court battles and self-respect. I didn't tell a soul. Not Tito, not Earl, not even the mirror. Some things are too good to risk jinxing. I went home, sat on my ratty couch, and stared at that account balance like it might vanish if I blinked wrong. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I laughed until I cried. It hit me all at once. The irony, the timing, the pure absurdity of it. Life had stripped me down, humiliated me, burned my name, and just when I'd accepted my fate as a washed-up exit, living above a laundromat, the universe said, "Psych." That night, I made myself a feast. 2 packs of ramen instead of 1, an egg on top, and a side of disbelief. I toasted Grandpa Henry with a chipped mug of instant coffee. "You sly old bastard," I said. "Guess you knew I'd screw things up eventually." I slept like a baby for the first time in years. Because for the first time since Clara walked out with half my world, I didn't feel like a loser. I felt dangerous again. Like maybe, just maybe, the old Lucas Merritt wasn't dead, just on a very long commercial break. And as I stared at that ceiling with its cracks and cobwebs, I whispered, "Clara, Julian, your rerun's about to get canceled." Courtrooms are just theaters where people wear worse clothes and pretend lies are paperwork. I learned that the hard way. My divorce hearing felt less like justice and more like a 3-act tragedy written by someone who really hated men with back problems and a savings account. The morning of the final hearing, I woke up on my couch because my bed had developed a spring that jabbed me like it held a grudge and made coffee so weak even Jesus wouldn't bless it. I wore my one good suit, the one that didn't smell like instant noodles, and stared at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked like every sad country song ever written. Gray hair trying to be brave, tie crooked, confidence MIA. But you know what? I still straightened my shoulders and said, let's go get publicly humiliated. I got to the courthouse early, mostly because my lawyer, Frankie Goss, has a looser concept of time than a toddler at Disney World. Frankie's 72, half-deaf, and allergic to punctuality. He's also the only lawyer I could afford after Clara hired a small army of legal assassins. The man had been in law since the Nixon era, and I'm pretty sure his briefcase was older than my son. When I found him that morning, he was outside the courtroom, eating a bagel with cream cheese on his tie and calling me Larry. Lucas, I corrected him. My name's Lucas. He squinted at me. That's what I said, Larry. Fantastic. My fate rested in the hands of a man who thought my name was a suggestion. Then came them. Clara entered like a celebrity walking into court for tax evasion, dressed in all black, oversized sunglasses, pretending she hadn't personally turned my life into a bankruptcy-themed miniseries. Her lips were pressed into that polite, smug smile that made me want to apply for witness protection. And walking beside her, like he'd been carved from pure arrogance and coconut oil, was Julian Ward. If human smugness had a face, it would be his. Perfect tan, perfect teeth, hair that clearly had a stylist on retainer. He was wearing a Rolex that could probably power a small village. Morning, Mr. Merritt, he said, extending a hand like we were at a golf tournament instead of a firing squad. How's the bachelor life treating you? I smiled. Pretty good. How's the home-wrecking business? Clara gasped. Julian laughed, the kind of laugh people use when they don't want to admit they've been roasted. Always the comedian, he said. Always the punchline. I shot back. We entered the courtroom. The place smelled like old coffee, nervous sweat, and bad decisions. The judge, a middle-aged woman with glasses and a permanent expression of, I'm underpaid for this, sat behind her bench. Her nameplate read Honorable Judge S. Watkins, but she didn't look particularly honored to be there. On one side, Clara and Julian, whispering, smirking, radiating smugness like it was solar energy. On my side, me, my outdated suit, and Frankie, who was flipping through the wrong case file until I pointed it out. The proceedings began, and I swear it was like watching a Broadway production titled How to Lose Everything Without Dying. Clara dabbed fake tears with tissues that probably cost more than my rent. Julian made speeches about how I was emotionally volatile and unfit to handle large-scale financial assets. Yeah, the man stealing my company called me unfit. Then came the witnesses, a parade of human fiction writers. There was Clara's best friend, Marjorie, who swore she'd seen me throw things in anger. Technically true, I once threw a frozen burrito at the wall after forgetting to pierce the plastic. Another claimed I verbally intimidated staff, which might have been the time I told Gary from accounting that Excel doesn't care about his feelings. Frankie objected twice, once for relevance, once because he sneezed and thought someone said his name. The judge sustained neither. At one point, Clara broke into a sob and said, he destroyed my peace of mind. I muttered under my breath, you destroyed my credit score. The judge shot me a look. I smiled. Sorry, Your Honor. Reflex. Then Julian put on his show. He strode to the center of the room, hands clasped dramatically, voice smooth as buttered lies. Your Honor, he began, my client devoted 30 years to this marriage, supporting Mr. Merritt through every hardship. But now, she's been left with nothing but emotional scars. I raised my hand. And 3 beach houses, a Mercedes, and my yacht. Don't forget the yacht. The judge said, Mr. Merritt, no outbursts. Sorry, I said, just trying to help her list assets accurately. Julian smiled like a shark. Your Honor, this kind of behavior illustrates exactly what my client endured. Yeah, sarcasm and fact-checking, real domestic horrors. After 3 hours of this circus, Frankie finally stood. He cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and delivered what might be the shortest closing statement in legal history. My client's not crazy. He just loved wrong. Then he sat down. I stared at him. That's it. That's your defense. He patted my shoulder. Short and memorable, Larry. The judge took a long pause. She scribbled something, adjusted her glasses, and said words that should have come with a defibrillator. All joint assets and holdings are to be divided equally between the parties. However, due to evidence of mismanagement presented by the petitioner, Merritt Movers will remain under Mrs. Merritt's control pending review. I blinked. Pending review? Of what? My breathing pattern? Julian smiled like he'd just gotten tenure in hell. Clara touched his arm like they'd just won a Grammy for most unholy duo. The gavel hit the desk. The sound echoed through me like a gunshot. That was it. Decades of work, gone. My trucks, my warehouses, the empire I'd built from sweat and bad coffee, handed over to the woman who once said she was allergic to logistics. I walked out of that courtroom in a daze. Frankie trailed behind, humming like we'd just left a matinee. Could have been worse, he said. You could have lost the dog. We didn't have a dog. See? Optimism. Outside, the city buzzed like nothing had happened. Cars honked. People laughed. The world moved on. Rude. Really, considering my life had just imploded. Reporters weren't waiting. Nobody cared. In the movies, you walk out of court and a crowd gasps. In real life, you walk out and realize your parking meter expired. I stood there on the courthouse steps, holding a cardboard box filled with the only things I owned from the company. A few mugs, a plaque that said Visionary of the Year, and my favorite pen. That pen had signed contracts worth millions. Now it just leaked ink on my shirt pocket like a metaphor for my dignity. I sat on a nearby bench and stared at the street. Across from me, a hot dog vendor was yelling, 2 for $5. And suddenly I realized I could afford one. I bought it. Best damn hot dog of my life. When I got home that night, my phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. My heart jumped. Maybe, just maybe, my kid had come around. I opened it. Mom says you should take time to reflect. I stared at it, thumbs hovering over the keyboard. I typed, tell Mom I reflected and saw Satan in Prada, then deleted it. Instead, I just replied, thanks, son. After that, silence. The next morning, I found Frankie's bill in my mailbox. The man charged me for emotional labor. I laughed so hard I almost passed out. Emotional labor, my ass. The only emotion he showed was hunger. Still, I couldn't even be mad. Somewhere deep down, I knew I'd messed up. I'd spent years chasing deals and expansion while ignoring the fact that Clara had stopped being my partner and started being my auditor. I'd assumed love was like equity. Once built, it holds value. Turns out, it depreciates faster than a used car. The next few weeks blurred together. I sold my remaining shares just to stay afloat. Friends vanished faster than my savings. The same guys who'd once begged for my advice now ghosted my calls. Apparently, loyalty expires when your net worth does. But despite it all, something inside me refused to die. Maybe pride, maybe spite, probably both. One night, I stood on my balcony, if you can call a metal railing and a pigeon nest a balcony, and stared out at the city. Neon lights reflected off wet pavement, and I thought, so this is rock bottom. But it didn't feel final. More like intermission. That's when I made a promise to myself. No, not the dramatic kind. Not, I'll rise again, nonsense. More like, I'm not dying like this, broke, bitter, and listening to Earl's EDM at 3 a.m. The next morning, I dug through my old boxes, hunting for something. Anything that might remind me who I used to be. That's when I found the old green envelope. Grandpa Henry's card. The one that would flip my story upside down in ways no courtroom could predict. But that's a tale for another chapter. For now, I went to bed with an empty wallet, a full stomach. Thanks, Tito's leftover empanadas, and one unshakable thought. If life's a circus, I might as well learn how to tame lions. If there's an art to losing everything, I'm Michelangelo with a side of midlife crisis. You don't realize how many ways life can humiliate you until you go from CEO to guy counting coins at the laundromat. I used to sign million-dollar contracts. Now I sign my name on detergent bottles because Tito, the landlord from hell, insists every tenant personalize their soap. Says it builds community. Sure, Tito, nothing says community like sharing mildew. The morning after the court ruling, I woke up to the gentle sound of a leaky faucet and the not-so-gentle sound of my neighbor Earl blasting EDM. It was 6 a.m. Earl's retired, which apparently means he's on a mission. To remind the rest of us that sleep is for people with pensions, I pulled the pillow over my head, but the bass still vibrated through the floorboards like God was doing jumping jacks upstairs. Coffee was my only salvation. I brewed it in my $9 Mr. Coffee machine, which sounded like a dying raccoon and spat out what could only be described as caffeinated despair. I stared at the cup like it owed me an apology. Once upon a time, I had assistants bringing me triple-filtered espressos topped with organic foam. Now, my coffee looked like something scraped off a car battery. But that's the thing about rock bottom. It comes with perks. For starters, nobody expects anything from you anymore. You can wear the same shirt 3 days in a row, and people just assume you're adjusting. You can drink cheap whiskey at noon and call it coping. Freedom, baby. Still, the silence hit different. My phone barely buzzed except for spam calls and my bank app reminding me how broke I was. Even Caleb had gone radio silent. I stared at our old photo on the fridge, me in a tux, him in braces, both of us grinning like we'd beaten the world. That photo used to make me proud. Now it felt like a participation trophy from a life I'd flunked. Earl knocked around noon, wearing a tank top that said retired, not expired. He held 2 coffees and a grin too big for his face. "Morning, moneybags," he yelled. "Earl, for the love of caffeine, my name is Lucas." Yeah. You still rich in spirit, moneybags." He sat without asking, Earl's thing. My place is technically a studio, but he acts like it's his summer home. "Heard you lost the court thing." "Word travels fast," I muttered. He shrugged. "Tito's niece works in records. Small world. Anyway, you'll bounce back. Guys like you always do. You got that look." "What look?" He sipped. "The look of a man who's too pissed to stay down." And damn it, he wasn't wrong. I was pissed. Pissed at Clara. Pissed at Julian. Pissed at the judge. Pissed at every decision that landed me here. But mostly, pissed at myself. That night, I tried to watch TV, but my cable subscription had expired, along with my dignity. So, I flipped through old boxes of Merit Movers files, thinking maybe nostalgia could substitute for therapy. That's when I found it, the green envelope. At first, I thought it was junk mail. But when I saw the handwriting, neat cursive, all loops and patience, I froze. Henry Merritt. Grandpa. The man, the myth, the reason my work ethic had trust issues. I sat on the couch, envelope in hand, heart pounding. Inside was a bank card, no chip, no logo, just First National Trust, and a note that said, "For emergency use only." I laughed out loud. "Grandpa, buddy, if this ain't an emergency, then FEMA owes me a medal." I put the card on the table, stared at it, and wondered if maybe I was hallucinating. After all, Grandpa had been dead for decades. The man used to stash cash in cookie tins and call banks legalized thieves. So, the idea of him having an actual account felt absurd. The next morning, curiosity dragged me out of bed. I threw on my least offensive clothes, faded jeans, a shirt that said "I'm fine, everything's fine," and took the bus downtown. The bus ride was its own brand of purgatory. A crying baby, a guy arguing with himself about politics, and me, holding a card that might hold either $50 or a cosmic joke. First National Trust looked like a relic, marble floors, brass counters, employees who probably still used fax machines. The young teller, a woman with bubblegum hair and a piercing shaped like a lightning bolt, looked me up and down like I was lost. "Hi," I said, handing her the card. "Need to check the balance on this account. It's old." She typed, frowned, then called her manager. That's never a good sign. Out comes Mr. Lowell, balding, sweating, the human embodiment of mild panic. He typed, blinked, typed again, and then his face turned the color of skim milk. "Sir," he said, voice trembling, "this account's been active since 1948. "Yeah, my granddad opened it," I said. "Old school guy. Probably a couple bucks in there. Maybe enough for lunch." He rotated the monitor toward me. My eyes landed on the number. $143,902,876.47. I thought I'd misread it. I leaned closer. Nope. Still there. Still absurd. Still mine. Lowell asked if I needed medical assistance. I laughed so hard the security guard started inching closer. No, I'm fine. Just wondering if y'all validate parking for people who suddenly need therapy." He handed me an envelope, a letter sealed with wax, my grandpa's initials stamped on the back. "This was in our records. It's addressed to you." My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, Grandpa's neat handwriting. If you're reading this, Lucas, life's probably kicked you where it hurts. I built this account after my business partner betrayed me. Remember, real wealth isn't what's flaunted, it's what's hidden for the right person at the right time. If you got this, you're that person. Don't waste it. I must have looked insane, laughing, crying, muttering to myself like a preacher at a slot machine. I thanked the man, stumbled out of the bank, and stood on the sidewalk, squinting at the sun like it was too bright for my new tax bracket. For the first time in years, I felt alive. Not young, let's not get dramatic, but alive. Like someone had injected purpose straight into my bloodstream. I didn't tell a soul. Not Earl, not Tito, not even Caleb, especially not Caleb. I went home, locked the door, and poured myself the cheapest whiskey in the cabinet. I raised my glass to the ceiling and said, "Well played, Grandpa. You magnificent paranoid bastard." The next few days were a blur of disbelief and paranoia. I checked the account 3 times, convinced it had vanished like a dream. But it was real. So was the power humming beneath it. I spent an afternoon writing lists. What to do, what not to do. Do. Hire a financial advisor. Don't. Buy a Ferrari out of spite. Do. Get revenge legally. Don't. Text Clara, guess who's rich again, sweetheart. I took the bus again, because irony's my co-pilot, and found a small financial consultancy above a pizza shop. That's where I met Wes Kramer. Mid-40s, quiet, wore cardigans like they were armor. He used to manage hedge funds before he got tired of yacht people. His words, not mine. He listened to my story without blinking, then said, "You don't need a financial planner, Mr. Merritt. You need stealth." That line stuck with me. Stealth. Because if there's one thing life taught me, it's that revenge works best when it looks like retirement. Wes helped me open offshore accounts, trusts, and entities so complex even the IRS would need Google Maps to find them. He was discreet, efficient, and allergic to gossip. Within 2 weeks, my fortune was safer than a nun at a poker table. Meanwhile, I kept up appearances, wore wrinkled shirts, still took the bus, still bought 2-for-1 ramen like a man on food stamps. I even let Earl think I was applying for a janitor job. Character building, I told him. But inside, the fire was back. Clara and Julian thought they'd buried me. They had no idea I was about to crawl out of that grave with a briefcase full of hellfire and compound interest. One night, Earl and I sat outside, him drinking beer, me pretending to. "You ever think about getting even?" he asked. "Every damn day," I said. He nodded, like he understood more than he should. "Just remember, get even smart, not fast." "Yeah," I said, "smart sounds nice." But my version of smart was about to redefine patience. I went to bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Clara's smug face in that courtroom, Julian's perfect hair, Caleb's distant voice. I thought about every deal, every truck, every sleepless night that built Merritt Movers, and how easily it all got stolen. I clenched my fists and smiled. They thought I was done. They hadn't met the version of me with $143 million and nothing left to lose. When you've been broke long enough, you stop believing in miracles. You start believing in coupons, flash sales, and the occasional buy one get one free as proof that God still cares. So the morning I walked into First National Trust, I wasn't chasing a miracle. I was chasing lunch money. I woke up that day to the familiar sound of Earl arguing with his radio downstairs. He was yelling about how gas prices are government propaganda, while his dog, Duke, barked backup vocals. I rolled off my couch, stretched, and stared at the envelope with Grandpa Henry's old bank card still sitting on my table. I'd dreamed about it all night. The kind of dream where you wake up rich and then realize you're still wearing socks with holes in them. "All right, Henry," I muttered, brushing my teeth with tap water that tasted like rust and irony. "Let's see if your idea of an emergency covers ramen shortages." I threw on my one decent shirt, the blue one that smelled faintly of courtroom anxiety, and a jacket 2 sizes too big. I looked like a man going to ask for a loan he wouldn't get. My reflection in the mirror said, "You've lost your mind." I said back, "Buddy, that train left years ago." The bus ride downtown was its own therapy session. A toddler kicked my shin rhythmically, an old lady talked to her purse, and the driver hummed like he was paid per vibration. I sat there clutching that green envelope like it held the last thread of my dignity. I figured maybe there'd be $50 in the account. Enough for decent groceries, maybe a steak if the universe was feeling generous. First National Trust was one of those banks that still smelled like cigars and old money. Polished floors, brass fixtures, and paintings of men who probably yelled at servants for sport. I half expected someone to stop me at the door and say, "Sorry, sir, we don't cash emotional baggage here." A young teller with pink hair and the facial expression of someone spiritually done with customer service asked, "How can I help you today?" I slid the card across the counter. "Need to check the balance on this. Might be expired, kind of vintage." She scanned it, frowned, tapped a few keys, then frowned harder. That's weird." She called her manager like I'd handed her a live grenade. Enter Mr. Lowell. Mid-50s, bald, sweating, and radiating middle management anxiety. He adjusted his tie so many times I thought it might file for a restraining order. "Sir," he said, glancing at the card, "this account hasn't been accessed since 1948. I blinked. Yeah, my grandfather opened it. Probably has a couple bucks in it. Enough for a sandwich and a good cry. He typed something, froze, then looked at me like I'd just told him I was the ghost of Elvis. "Sir, are you aware this account's been accruing compound interest, uninterrupted, for 75 years? I squinted. "You mean it's still alive?" He turned the monitor toward me. There, glowing like divine intervention, was the balance. $143,902,876.47. For a moment, I thought I'd misread. Maybe I was seeing decimals where commas should be. I blinked. Still there. Still absurd. Still mine. Lowell cleared his throat. "Are you feeling all right?" "Define all right," I said. "Because if this is a prank, I'm about to throw hands with Jesus." The poor guy stammered. "It's real, sir. The account was set up under Henry Merritt and Beneficiaries Trust. You're the sole heir." I started laughing, that kind of unhinged laugh that makes security guards shift uncomfortably. People turned to stare. Someone whispered, "He's lost it." Correct. I'd lost it and found $143 million in the same hour. Lowell produced another envelope sealed with wax. Inside was a letter in Grandpa Henry's sharp handwriting. "If you're reading this, life probably kicked you in the teeth. Don't panic. I left this so one Merritt could fail spectacularly and still have a fighting chance. Real wealth isn't loud, it's patient. Spend it wisely, not proudly." I stood there, misty-eyed and grinning like a lunatic. "Grandpa Henry, you glorious, cryptic genius." Lowell leaned forward nervously. "Would you like to make a withdrawal?" "Yeah," I said. $50. His jaw dropped. $50. Yup. Don't want to spook the IRS. He processed the transaction with the delicacy of a man defusing a bomb. I signed the slip, pocketed a crisp 50, and walked out like I'd just robbed Fort Knox using charm alone. Outside, the city never looked brighter. The sunlight hit me like caffeine. People rushed past, glued to their phones, oblivious that a broke old man had just joined the secret billionaires club. I wanted to shout, "I'm rich," but figured that'd end with a mugging and a headline that said local idiot becomes rich, immediately dies. I found the nearest diner, the kind that's been around since Elvis had hips, and ordered everything I hadn't been able to afford for months. Pancakes, bacon, eggs, and orange juice that didn't come from concentrate. The waitress, Patty, looked at me like she wasn't buying my sudden optimism. "What's the occasion, sugar?" "Miracle," I said. "Just had one." "Well," she said, pouring coffee, "you better tip better than the last guy who said that." I did. I left her a 20, and she nearly dropped the pot. "You sure about that?" "Lady," I said, grinning. "I've never been more unsure in my life." By the time I got home, the ramen packets on my counter looked insulted. I stared at them, shook my head, and said, "You're retired now." Then I sat on my couch and let the reality wash over me. I had money. No, I had power. But power without a plan is just fireworks, flashy, noisy, and gone too soon. I needed to be smart. The kind of smart that makes your enemies underestimate you. That's when I found Wes Kramer. He came highly recommended by a friend of a friend who'd once worked with billionaires but preferred clients who still had souls. His office was above a pizza shop, which screamed low profile and possibly rat problem, but I liked that about him already. Wes was mid-40s, wore glasses that made him look like a librarian who knew 5 ways to hide a fortune. He listened while I told him everything. Clara, Julian, the courtroom circus, the betrayal, the ramen. He didn't blink once. When I finished, he said, You don't need a financial advisor, Mr. Merritt. You need an invisibility cloak. I raised an eyebrow. You got one in Excel? He smiled. We'll make one. Within days, Wes had set up shell companies, offshore trusts, and investments so discreet they could hide from God himself. Every move was clean, legal, and quiet. He made me sign documents I didn't understand but sounded cool, things like blind LLC holdings and non-revocable trusts. He was basically building me a fortress out of paperwork. You can't let anyone know, he said. Not your landlord, not your neighbor, especially not your ex-wife. I nodded. Don't worry. The last time she heard trust, it was part of the phrase fund she drained. While Wes managed the money, I played my role to perfection. The washed-up, pitiful old man everyone pitied. I still took the bus, still wore thrift store shoes, even let Earl think I was applying for a security guard job. Gotta stay humble, I told him, while secretly owning more wealth than the city council combined. Tito stopped by to remind me about rent. He leaned in the doorway, puffing a cigar that smelled like expired pine cones. You're late again, Chief. I handed him cash. Advance payment. Next 6 months. He blinked. You hit the lottery? Something like that, I said. Divine intervention with better math. He squinted, suspicious. If the feds show up, I'm telling them you're a magician. Fair, I said. Just tell them my trick involves compound interest. After he left, I opened Grandpa's letter again. His words burned brighter the second time. Spend it wisely, not proudly. That line hit me like a sermon. I'd spent my whole life chasing big moves. The company, the status, the validation. All it took was losing everything to realize what real leverage looked like. Silence. I didn't tell Caleb, though God knows I wanted to. I imagined his reaction. Surprise. Guilt. Maybe that look he used to give me when he was proud. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. The world had written me off as broke, bitter, and beaten. Let them keep thinking that. It's easier to strike when no one's watching the board. Weeks passed, and the money sat untouched except for basic expenses. I kept working with Wes, building foundations, dummy accounts, and investments in places even Julian's slick lawyers couldn't sniff out. The guy was an artist. By the end of it, I could have funded a small nation or bought the Lakers, if I ever forgave them. Every night, I'd sit on my balcony, cheap whiskey in hand, staring at the skyline. It looked different now. Not intimidating, inviting. The city wasn't just a maze of glass and greed anymore. It was a chessboard, and I finally had my pieces back. I thought about Clara's smug grin, Julian's cologne-soaked confidence, the judge's bored eyes. I thought about the day they took everything, and how poetic it'd be when I took it back. Not with shouting, not with violence, but with paperwork, patience, and precision. Revenge was best served legal. One night, Earl caught me smiling for no reason. What's got you looking like you just robbed heaven? Just realized, I said, swirling my glass. Sometimes life gives you lemons and a multi-million-dollar lemonade stand. He laughed. Whatever you're cooking up, moneybags, don't blow the building up. No promises, I said. I didn't sleep much that night. My brain was buzzing with possibilities. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what I could rebuild and who deserved to watch me do it. I wasn't just going to survive Clara and Julian. I was going to outsmart them so hard they'd think karma hired a financial consultant. And all it took to start the comeback of the century? $50 and a miracle. The thing about miracles is they never come with instructions. You get hit with one, and suddenly you're sitting in your roach-sized apartment with $143 million in your bank account, eating leftover pizza and wondering if you're morally obligated to start wearing fancier socks. It's disorienting, like winning the lottery, but realizing the prize is responsibility. I spent the first few days walking around in a haze. Not the kind of haze people get from weed or nostalgia. This was the holy hell. I'm rich, but still microwaving ramen kind. Every time I looked at my online banking app, I half expected it to vanish. I refreshed the page so often, the app asked if I was concerned about fraud. No, Chase, I'm just concerned about reality. The real turning point came when I sat down to read Grandpa Henry's letter properly. Not in the middle of a panic attack at a bank, but quietly. Lights dim, glass of cheap whiskey, out of habit, not necessity, and my reading glasses perched on my nose like a man about to summon ghosts. The letter was thick parchment, slightly yellowed, folded perfectly. Grandpa had that kind of discipline. His handwriting was like military precision, sharp, clean, and full of authority even from beyond the grave. I unfolded it carefully, the wax seal breaking like it had been waiting 70 years for me to get my act together. It started with, "If you're reading this, you've probably hit rock bottom. Congratulations, that means you're finally ready." I snorted. "Well, congrats to me, I guess." The letter went on. "I built this account after my business partner betrayed me. I didn't fight him in court, I fought him with time. Compound interest, my boy, is revenge that doesn't break laws. I didn't leave this fortune for comfort. I left it for rebirth. Real wealth isn't what's flaunted. It's what's hidden until the right person needs it." I read it 3 times. By the third, I was laughing and crying at the same time, which, if you've never tried it, makes you look like you're auditioning for a Lifetime movie. Grandpa had done it. He'd managed to be both sentimental and passive-aggressive, a true Merit legacy. There was one final line that stuck like glue to my brain. "When the world takes your name, build a new one." That's the Merit way. I leaned back, letting that sink in. The man had basically built a time bomb of redemption and left it ticking for me to find at the perfect moment. Henry Merit wasn't just my grandfather. He was the ghostwriter of my comeback story. The next morning, I decided I was done living like a broke philosopher. I went shopping, not for yachts or Ferraris, but socks. Yes, socks. You'd be amazed what confidence a fresh pair can bring. I bought 10 pairs of thick, soft, not-on-sale socks and felt like Rockefeller. I even treated myself to a real breakfast, eggs and bacon. Not turkey bacon, the real kind that clogs arteries and brings joy. After breakfast, I called Wes. He answered on the first ring, voice calm as ever. "Morning, Mr. Merit. How are we feeling today?" "Like Lazarus with a checking account," I said. I read Grandpa's letter. He chuckled. "Ah, the gospel according to Henry Merit. Inspiring, isn't it?" "Inspiring? It's a roadmap to vengeance disguised as financial advice." "I take it we're moving forward, then?" "Full steam ahead. But quietly. No sudden movements. I want this to be biblical." "Understood," he said. "Let's talk strategy." And just like that, my new life began. Not as the CEO of Merit Movers, but as the ghost of the man who'd built it. Wes helped me craft an identity that was both invisible and unstoppable. We created an investment firm, discreet, nameless, just initials. HM Holdings, a little nod to Grandpa. It was technically owned by an offshore trust, which was owned by another trust, which was owned by an accountant in Malta who didn't know he worked for me. Layers on layers. Wes said, "The key is silence. You don't flex wealth, you weaponize it." I grinned. "Wes, that's the sexiest thing anyone's ever said to me." Meanwhile, I kept playing my part. Earl still saw me as Moneybags, the broke guy with too much free time. Tito still came by once a week to fix things that weren't broken. My neighbors still looked at me like I was one bounce check away from eviction. Perfect. I was hiding in plain sight, and no one had a clue that I could buy the building 3 times over just to evict them all for sport. But beneath that calm exterior, the gears were turning. I wasn't just going to enjoy my money. I was going to use it. Because while I'd been licking my wounds, Clara and her new lawyer boyfriend Julian had been living it up in my old house, driving my cars, and spending company money like Monopoly cash. I saw photos online, them at galas, smiling for cameras, philanthropy events funded by the company I built. My company. I'd scroll through those pictures at night, sipping my whiskey, whispering, "Smile while you can, sweetheart." Wes was thorough. He hired forensic accountants to quietly dig through Merit Movers' financials. Within 2 weeks, we had enough dirt to start a community garden. Offshore transfers, fake charitable donations, forged receipts. Julian's idea of ethics was apparently, don't get caught before dessert. When Wes showed me the report, I laughed so hard I almost spilled my drink. He used a fake shell company called Ward Logistics Consulting. Real subtle, the man literally named it after himself. Wes nodded. Confidence makes people sloppy. "So what's next?" I asked. He leaned forward, eyes sharp behind those calm glasses. "Next, we let them keep digging their hole. You don't interrupt a man mid-burial." God, I love this guy. In the evenings, I'd walk the beach, not the fancy kind, just the strip of sand behind a rundown pier near my place. The air smelled like salt and rust. The waves hissed like they were sharing secrets. I'd think about Grandpa's words, build a new name. I didn't know what that name would be yet, but I knew one thing. It wouldn't be Lucas Merritt, the washed-up CEO. It'd be someone sharper, calmer, more deliberate. Someone who didn't just survive betrayal. He monetized it. It was around that time that I started keeping a journal. Not the Dear Diary kind, more of a war log. Every page started with the same line, "They think I'm done." I'd write ideas, plans, observations. People underestimate how much power there is in writing things down. Makes chaos look organized. By the end of week 1, I had a blueprint. By the end of week 2, I had contacts. By the end of week 3, I had purpose. And purpose is a hell of a drug. Earl noticed the change. "You've been smiling a lot lately," he said one afternoon while sipping beer on the stoop. "You dating again, Moneybags?" "Yeah," I said. "Her name's Karma." He laughed. "She hot?" "Gorgeous," I said. "Bit slow, but worth the wait." Inside, though, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation. I wasn't just taking back what they stole. I was taking back me. The drive, the focus, the humor, the parts of Lucas Merritt that got buried under bitterness. Clara thought she'd destroyed me. Joke's on her. She just rebooted me. That's the Lazarus effect. You don't come back the same. You come back sharper. You remember who buried you. Sure. But you also remember what it felt like to breathe again. By the end of the month, HM Holdings had discreetly invested in 3 major logistics firms, all competitors of Merritt Movers. Through a chain of silent partnerships and legal disguises, I technically owned 12% of the entire market my ex-wife thought she controlled. If Poetic Justice were a stock, mine was skyrocketing. Wes and I celebrated with cheap burgers. I paid in cash, of course, keeping up appearances. "To Grandpa Henry," I said, raising my glass. Wes smiled. "To patience, the rarest currency of all." As I walked home that night, I felt something I hadn't in years, peace. Not because I was rich, but because I finally understood wealth. It's not the cars, or the houses, or even the zeros on a screen. It's knowing you can lose it all and still get up. It's knowing you can play dead while planning resurrection. And as I stepped into my apartment, flicking on the buzzing light, I looked up at the ceiling and said, "You were right, Grandpa. Real wealth isn't flaunted. It's hidden." Then I laughed, because if the old man could see me now, barefoot, rich, and plotting redemption with a retired bus driver as my neighbor, he'd probably say, "Good. Don't screw it up this time." But sorry, Grandpa. Screwing things up is how Merritts get creative. You ever have one of those mornings where you wake up, stare at the ceiling, and realize you've officially run out of excuses not to ruin your enemies? Yeah, that was me. Sunlight was leaking through my cheap curtains like it was breaking into the wrong apartment, and I lay there thinking, all right, Lucas, you've got the money. You've got the motive. Now you just need the method. Grandpa Henry's letter was still on my nightstand, mocking me with that line. Real wealth isn't flaunted. It's hidden for the right person at the right time. Well, Henry, the right time, had a name, date, and a smug lawyer named Julian Ward. So, I did what any rational, secretly rich old man would do. I made coffee strong enough to dissolve guilt and started Googling best revenge strategies that won't lead to prison. Turns out, there's a fine line between justice and a Netflix documentary. I needed someone who knew that line by heart. Enter Patricia Hollings, Pat, to her friends, Your Honor, to people she eviscerated professionally. She used to be a prosecutor until she realized private practice paid better and came with nicer shoes. Her reputation? Legendary. Rumor had it she once cross-examined a man into confessing he wasn't even guilty. Wes set up the meeting. She's brilliant, he said, but she doesn't do pity cases. Good, I said. I'm not pitiful. I'm vengeful with better credit now. Her office was in a downtown high-rise that smelled like ambition and disinfectant. When she walked in, I almost stood out of habit. Mid-40s, sharp suit, sharper eyes, looked like she filed restraining orders against emotions. She shook my hand like it was a contract. So, Mr. Merritt, she said, taking a seat. You want revenge. I prefer the word justice. But with confetti. She smirked. And you want it legal. Preferably. My golf swing's not what it used to be, so homicide's off the table. Good. Let's talk strategy. She listened to everything. Clara, Julian, the court fiasco, the forged financials, the whole tragic sitcom that was my life. When I finished, she leaned back, eyes glinting. Julian Ward. I know that name. He's been skating on technicalities for years. Can you make him trip? She smiled slowly. Mr. Merritt, I don't make them trip. I move the finish line. For the first time in months, I felt the faint hum of hope, the kind that buzzes right before chaos becomes art. Pat took on the case pro bono for strategic satisfaction. Translation. She hated people like Julian for sport. Within days, my tiny apartment became a war room. Pat brought in a team. Forensic accountants who spoke fluent fraud, digital investigators who could resurrect deleted emails, and a paralegal named Nia Cruz, 20-something, sharp-tongued, wore hoodies that said things like, I object. Nia set up shop at my rickety table, 3 laptops open. Mr. Merritt, she said, typing faster than a caffeine-addicted pianist. You sure you want to see all this? It's ugly. I lived through a 25-year marriage with Clara, I said. My tolerance for ugly's Olympic level. Turns out, Julian had more skeletons than a Halloween outlet. Offshore accounts. Fake injury claims. Even a charity that supposedly provided legal aid to widows. Except the widows' signatures were forged, and the aid went straight to a condo in Miami. Pat's eyes gleamed like she'd just discovered buried treasure. Beautiful, she whispered. This is career-ending. Meanwhile, I perfected my cover act. I kept dressing like a man one bounce check away from despair. Took the bus. Bought discount groceries. Even complained loudly about inflation at the bodega so the locals would keep underestimating me. Every time someone said, poor Mr. Merritt, I'd smile and think, yes, please, keep thinking that. Pat's plan unfolded like a heist movie. Step 1, gather evidence. Step 2, leak just enough to the right people to get Julian nervous. Step 3, let him expose himself trying to cover it up. And oh, did he panic beautifully. Within a week, his firm quietly moved money between consulting branches. By week 2, one of his junior partners mysteriously resigned. By week 3, we had him boxed in like a raccoon in a trash can. Pat briefed me over coffee at a diner, the same one where I'd once tipped Patty $20 for pancakes. You ready for the fun part? She asked. Fun? Lady, I'm 70 years old. My idea of fun is a chair that doesn't squeak. Trust me, she said, sliding a file across the table. You'll enjoy this kind. Inside were photos, emails, bank records, the works. Julian and Clara's names all over fraudulent transactions. Even Clara's signature on a forged donation form. They'd siphoned over $6 million from Merritt Movers' charity arm. My company's charity arm. I whistled. You think that's enough? Oh, honey, Pat said, sipping her latte. This is foreplay. Nia chimed in without looking up from her tablet. The IRS loves this stuff. They haven't had a big fish in months. I leaned back, grinning. So what happens next? Pat's eyes sparkled. Next, we let them celebrate. The higher they climb, the funnier the fall. So we waited. I went back to pretending to be a broke retiree. Clara and Julian went back to flaunting their stolen fortune. They even announced an engagement. Because of course they did. When you've committed grand theft in heels, why not add delusion to the registry? They planned a gala, a night of new beginnings, at my old mansion. My house. The one I designed down to the doorknobs. When I saw the announcement online, I nearly choked on my oatmeal. I called Pat immediately. They're throwing a party. I know, she said. We're invited. I laughed. You're joking. Not at all. You won't be attending, of course. But our friends at the DA's office will. And just like that, Operation Comeback turned into Operation Poetic Justice. Pat spent the next 2 weeks coordinating with law enforcement. Turns out, Julian's charity fraud case overlapped with 3 other investigations. The man was a walking Ponzi scheme. Clara, bless her oblivious soul, had signed enough documents to qualify as a co-conspirator. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. The night before the gala, I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights blink like they knew what was coming. Earl ambled over with 2 beers. You look smug, he said. That's dangerous for a man your age. Tomorrow's gonna be special, I said. Birthday. Better. He grinned. You finally robbing a bank. Close, I said. I'm collecting interest. He laughed and toasted me. To whatever you're up to, don't die doing it. The next morning, Pat called with one final update. Everything's in place. By this time tomorrow, there'll be headline material. I asked, you think they'll see it coming? Julian Ward, she said. He thinks foresight's something you order with cocktails. So, I stayed home, brewed fresh coffee, and turned on the news. Because sometimes the best seat at Revenge is the couch. At exactly 9 p.m., live footage started flooding in from the gala. Fancy cars, champagne, and people pretending they weren't miserable in designer clothes. Then came the part I'd been waiting for: flashing lights, black SUVs, federal jackets, agents moving through the crowd like the world's least fun party crashers. Julian was mid-speech when they cuffed him. "You can't arrest me," he yelled. "I'm an attorney." One agent replied, "Not anymore." Chef's kiss. Clara fainted dramatically, her designer clutch hitting the marble floor like poetic punctuation. Cameras caught everything: the gasps, the chaos, the guests trying to slip out without their goodie bags. I sat there, coffee steaming, heart steady, and smiled so hard it hurt. Pat called a few minutes later. "It's done. They're both in custody." I exhaled, slow and satisfied. "You're a genius, Pat." "Don't flatter me," she said. "Flattery makes my rates go up." "Worth it." After we hung up, I poured myself another cup and leaned back. I didn't cheer. I didn't dance. I just let the quiet settle, the kind of quiet that feels earned. For the first time in years, I wasn't the punchline. I was the setup. Later that night, Earl knocked, holding his phone. "Hey, you seeing this? Some big shot lawyer got busted." "Crazy, right?" "Yeah," I said deadpan. "World's full of surprises." He nodded sagely. "Guess karma finally pays minimum wage." I chuckled. Sometimes she gives bonuses. When he left, I stood by the window, staring at the city skyline. The comeback had begun, and the best part? It was all legal. No threats, no violence, just patience, precision, and paperwork. The most powerful weapon in America. Grandpa Henry would have been proud. As I crawled into bed, the news anchor's voice echoed from the TV. Tonight's top story: celebrity lawyer Julian Ward and socialite Clara Merritt arrested for fraud and embezzlement in a stunning twist. I turned off the light, grinning in the dark. Operation Comeback. Mission accomplished, Phase 1. If Revenge had a soundtrack, mine would have been a jazz remix of Another One Bites the Dust. The night Clara and Julian decided to host their engagement gala, at my old mansion, mind you, wasn't just another social event. It was a cinematic masterpiece waiting for its third act twist. And spoiler alert, I wrote the twist. You have to picture it. My house, their house, sitting smugly on Hillcrest Drive. 3 floors of glass, marble, and bad karma. I'd built that place to impress governors and scare tax accountants. But tonight it was crawling with influencers, fake smiles, and champagne that probably cost more than my first truck. Clara had always wanted a statement event. Turns out, her statement would be delivered by the FBI. I wasn't there in person. Oh no, I had class and bail anxiety. Instead, I was stationed in my apartment, pajamas on, snacks ready, TV tuned to Channel 9, which had a live segment on the social event of the season. That's when you know karma's on your side, when the media decides to broadcast your ex's downfall in HD. Pat Hollings had done her magic. For weeks, her team gathered evidence, looped in the district attorney, and made sure every federal branch with a badge and a grudge got an invite. When the time came, the warrant stack was thicker than Julian's ego. All I had to do was sit back and let poetic justice RSVP itself. I'll admit, part of me felt nervous. Not guilt nervous, just the kind of nervous you get when you've spent years being the punchline and are finally about to see the joke flipped. I kept refreshing social media like a teenage gossip addict. Hashtags were already trending. Hashtag Clara and Julian. Hashtag Hillcrest Hearts. Hashtag Power Couple Goals. I almost felt bad for how fast those hashtags were about to age. Almost. At 8:47 p.m., the first live clip aired. The reporter, some overly excited woman in sequins, stood outside my old iron gate. We're here at the stunning Hillcrest estate where the newly engaged Julian Ward and Clara Merritt are celebrating their love with what's being called the Gala of the Year. I snorted. Try the arrest of the decade, sweetheart. Inside, guests were sipping champagne and pretending they weren't just there for free food and Instagram content. Julian, of course, was in a white tux because subtlety had filed for divorce. Clara glowed like a chandelier, diamond earrings, smug smile, and probably a heart rate that still thought. She'd won. Back at HQ, also known as my couch, I had front row seats to the world's fanciest downfall. Pat texted me, showtime. At 9 o'clock sharp, timing so perfect it could have been scripted, the first black SUV rolled up. Then another. Then three more. The camera caught the confusion. Security guards fumbling, valets dropping keys, and one guest whispering. Is this part of the entertainment? Oh, it was entertainment, all right. Agents in dark suits marched through the gates like they'd rehearsed it. The reporter outside nearly screamed with excitement. Breaking news. Federal authorities appear to be entering the venue. Inside, the band stopped mid-song. Guests froze mid-selfie. Julian, mid-toast, was holding up a glass of Dom Perignon, grinning like a man whose Google search history would soon become public record. An agent approached him. Julian Ward? Julian smirked. That depends who's asking. Special Agent Dawes, FBI. You're under arrest for wire fraud, tax evasion, and embezzlement. The crowd gasped like a telenovela audience. Clara laughed nervously, because that's what narcissists do when they run out of explanations. This must be a mistake, she said. We're philanthropists. Dawes raised an eyebrow. Sure, you've been very generous with other people's money. I nearly spilled my popcorn. Julian tried to bluff his way out, shouting, You can't arrest me. I'm an attorney. The agent replied, Not anymore. Chef's kiss. I wanted that line on a t-shirt. Clara started crying, mascara streaking down her perfect face. Someone caught it all on camera. Within minutes, the clip hit Twitter. I didn't have to refresh. The internet did it for me. Hashtag Power Couple Goals had been replaced by hashtag Fraudanfiance. Meanwhile, Pat Hollings called me. Her voice was pure calm. They're in custody. You sure it's real? I asked, half laughing, half crying. Oh, it's real. Julian tried to invoke attorney-client privilege while they cuffed him. The agent said, Lady's not your client anymore. She's your co-defendant. I actually had to put the phone down to laugh. News anchors went ballistic. Sources confirmed that federal agents seized computers, financial documents, and luxury vehicles from the Hillcrest estate. Every detail was a symphony. They even confiscated the Champagne Tower, which felt symbolic. I called Earl downstairs. Turn on Channel 9. Why? You'll see. 30 seconds later, I heard him yell through the floor. Holy hell, that's your ex-wife. Correction, I said. That's my ex-problem. He came running up, beer in hand. You did this, didn't you? Me? No. I'm just an innocent retiree enjoying some light federal programming. Earl grinned, shaking his head. Remind me never to piss you off. By 9:30, the live feed showed Clara being escorted out in handcuffs, still trying to explain herself to a reporter. This is a misunderstanding, Julian said. Yeah, sure he did. Julian also said, trust me. And look where that got you. The reporters swarmed like vultures at a buffet. One shouted, Mrs. Merritt, any comment? She screamed, It's ex-Mrs. Merritt. The agent next to her muttered, Yeah, not for long. I had to pause the TV because I was laughing too hard. Back at the mansion, guests were bolting for the doors. One man tried sneaking out with a shrimp cocktail. An agent confiscated it. Even the band packed up mid-song, which felt oddly poetic. By the time the SUVs drove off, Clara's perfect world had turned into a police-escorted parade. The final shot before the feed cut was her face pressed against the window, pale as guilt itself. Pat called again. All assets are frozen. Every account, every property. She's going to wake up tomorrow with a toothbrush, a lawyer, and an existential crisis. I let out a long breath. Feels final. It's not, Pat said. This is just the arrest. The trial comes next. I grinned. Then I'll bring popcorn and closure. That night, I poured myself a glass of whiskey, not the cheap kind, the bottle I'd been saving since the divorce, and sat by the window. The city lights blinked like applause. Somewhere out there, Clara was sitting in a holding cell, wondering how the universe had flipped so fast. And Julian? Probably trying to call a lawyer who still took his calls. Earl knocked again, couldn't contain himself. Man, I saw it all. They dragged her out in heels. That's commitment. Justice comes in all styles, I said. He laughed so loud it rattled the window. So what now, moneybags? Now, I said, we rebuild. And rebuild I did. Within a week, Pat had filed motions to reclaim my company assets. Merritt Movers, the baby I'd built, the empire they'd gutted, was finally coming home. She said, once the fraud's proven, ownership reverts automatically. Automatically? I asked. Like a refund? Exactly, she said. A very expensive, legally binding refund. I liked the sound of that. The press couldn't get enough of the scandal. Every day brought new headlines. Love and larceny. Power couple crumbles. The house that fraud built. Even Caleb called after years of silence. "Dad," he said, "what the hell happened?" "Just a little house cleaning," I told him. He was quiet for a moment. "I saw the news. You okay?" I hesitated. For years, that kid had looked at me through Clara's lens of lies. But now, I could hear the cracks. The guilt. The beginning of something like regret. "I'm better than okay, son. I'm finally me again." He didn't reply right away, but I heard him sniff. "Guess I should visit soon." "Bring beer," I said. "We'll celebrate with cheap stuff. Tastes better when it's earned." After we hung up, I realized something wild. For the first time in years, I wasn't angry. Not bitter. Just light. Like I'd been holding my breath for a decade and finally exhaled. Pat called again a few days later. "The DA's office wants to thank you for cooperating." "Cooperating? Lady, I barely did anything." "Exactly," she said. "That's what makes it so beautiful." When the court froze their assets, they also seized Merit Movers' corporate records. Pat and Nia went through them like archaeologists uncovering ancient stupidity. Every shell company, every fake invoice tied right back to Julian. He'd even used the same password for all his accounts. Ward-winner one. A man after my own delusions. By the end of the week, my legal team was a well-oiled machine. Pat handled the law, Wes handled the money, and I handled snarky commentary and late-night moral reflection. Together, we were the Justice League for divorce survivors. The trial date was set for 3 weeks later. Clara and Julian were denied bail. The photos of them leaving court in orange jumpsuits circulated faster than you could say karma. Someone online captioned it, "Orange is the new arrogance." I almost framed it. That night, I stood on my balcony again, the city quiet beneath me. I toasted Grandpa Henry with my last glass of whiskey. "You were right, old man," I said. "Compound interest pays off in more ways than one." And as the moon reflected off my glass, I laughed softly. Not the bitter kind I used to have, the kind that comes from peace. From knowing you didn't just get even, you got better. The night of champagne and handcuffs wasn't the end of my story. It was the plot twist that proved a simple truth. You can lose everything and still win if you play the long game and keep your sense of humor. Because nothing ages gracefully like revenge served with a wink and a receipt. There's a strange kind of silence that follows victory. Not the calm, Zen garden type of silence. The kind that hums with leftover adrenaline, like the world hasn't caught up yet. 3 weeks after the Hillcrest arrests, that's where I was. Sitting in a courtroom again. Only this time the weight wasn't on my shoulders. It was on theirs. The first day back in court felt like stepping onto a movie set where the roles had finally been reversed. Same judge's bench, same creaky seats, same smell of cheap perfume and bad decisions. But now I wasn't the broken man clutching tissues. I was the storm in a suit. Patricia Holling stood beside me, cool as an iced latte. Her briefcase could have doubled as a weapon, stuffed with documents that would end reputations. Nia Cruz was behind her, laptop open, fingers flying like a courtroom DJ. On the other side, Julian and Clara sat in matching orange jumpsuits. Couples therapy, but make it federal. Julian's tan had faded to the color of old oatmeal. His once perfect hair looked like it had been styled by depression itself. Clara, meanwhile, had that hollow, sleep-deprived stare that says, "I just realized prison doesn't have spa days." When Judge Morales entered, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with the posture of divine judgment, the room went dead quiet. The bailiff's "all rise" was almost unnecessary. Everyone rose instinctively, like guilt was magnetic. Pat leaned toward me and whispered, "Ready to get your company back?" I smirked. I was born ready. I just didn't know it'd take federal charges to do it. The proceedings began. The prosecution wasted no time. Boxes of evidence, bank records, testimony from accountants, even emails where Julian literally typed, "Clara, transfer funds before old man Merritt finds out." Yeah, real mastermind material. Pat's turn came. She didn't strut. She glided, confidence in motion. "Your Honor," she began, "my client, Mr. Lucas Merritt, was not merely defrauded. He was erased. These two individuals systematically dismantled his company, reputation, and personal assets through a series of fraudulent transfers. Today that ends. She laid out every lie, every stolen cent, every forged signature. Each point hit like a well-timed punchline. Julian tried to interject once, but Judge Morales shot him a glare so sharp it could have sliced his bail request in half. Clara's lawyer attempted damage control, arguing that she didn't fully understand what was happening. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Merritt, you're telling this court you accidentally deposited millions of dollars into fake accounts. Clara's lips trembled. I was misled. Pat smiled faintly. By your fiancé? You two shared everything, except morals. The courtroom chuckled. Even the stenographer paused mid-keystroke to smirk. After 4 hours of verbal demolition, Pat presented the final exhibit, the original Merritt Movers corporate charter, signed by me decades ago, and the fraudulent amendment Julian had filed to make himself CEO. She placed them side by side like before and after mugshots. Your Honor, she said, this isn't just about ownership. It's about identity. Lucas Merritt built this company from scratch. These people stole not only his assets, but his name. Judge Morales leaned back, steepling her fingers. Mr. Merritt, do you have anything you'd like to say before I rule? I stood, adjusted my tie, and took a slow breath. Your Honor, I've spent the last few years being called a lot of things. Crazy, broke, unstable. I stopped defending myself because I thought people only hear what they want to believe. But today, I just want one thing back, my name. Everything else, I can rebuild. Silence. Then the judge nodded once. Well said. She shuffled her papers, cleared her throat, and said the words I'd been waiting for since the day Clara filed for divorce. Effective immediately, the previous verdict is nullified. Ownership of Merritt Movers, including all associated assets and accounts, is restored to Mr. Lucas Merritt. For a second, the air left my lungs. The courtroom gasped. I heard someone whisper, "Holy hell." Julian slumped. Clara stared straight ahead, eyes glassy. Pat grinned like a proud general. Welcome back, Mr. Merritt. The judge continued. Furthermore, this court finds sufficient cause to recommend both defendants for full restitution and maximum sentencing pending federal trial. Translation, enjoy orange, it's the new blackmail. I exhaled, slow and steady. Every muscle in my body wanted to shout, laugh, or high-five the nearest federal agent. Instead, I just smiled, calm, controlled, lethal. Outside, the press swarmed. Flashbulbs, microphones, voices all shouting at once. Mr. Merritt, how does it feel to win it all back? I stopped, fixed my tie, and said, feels better than my ex-wife's lasagna ever did. The reporters laughed. Even the camera guy chuckled. Pat rolled her eyes, but she was grinning. The next morning's headlines were priceless. From broke to billionaire, the Merritt comeback. Love, lies, and logistics. Orange is the new wardrobe. My face was everywhere. The man who'd lost everything and won it back without breaking a law. Grandpa Henry would have been proud, probably also annoyed it took me this long. I decided to mark the occasion the only way I knew how, tacos. I went back to the courthouse cafeteria with a few of the clerks who'd been nice to me during my low days. Bought tacos for everyone. Because nothing says victory, I told them, like guacamole and legal precedent. Pat joined us halfway through. You're trending on Twitter, she said. Good, I said. Maybe I'll get a sponsorship deal with Karma. She laughed. You know, Lucas, you could write a book about this. Yeah, I said, but who'd believe it? Truth was, I didn't care about the fame. I didn't even care about the company, not the way I used to. What mattered was that my name, the thing they tried to destroy, now stood taller than ever. Merritt Movers was more than trucks and balance sheets. It was a symbol, proof that integrity might bend, but it doesn't break. Within a week, I was back in the company's office. The same glass tower I once built, now covered in dust and bad management. When I walked in, the receptionist nearly fainted. Mr. Merritt? I thought. Rumors of my demise, I said, were greatly exaggerated. The staff gathered in the lobby, whispering, curious. I stood on the same marble floor where Clara and Julian once strutted and said, we've been through hell. Time to rebuild. Not with greed, not with fear, with pride. Let's remind this city who we are. Applause. Actual, honest applause. I hadn't heard that sound in years. Later that night, I sat in my new old office, the one they'd turned into a storage room, and looked out at the skyline. The city shimmered like an apology. I poured myself coffee, the real kind, no more instant tragedy in a cup, and whispered, "We're back, Henry." Every damn inch. But the victory didn't feel like vengeance. It felt like balance. Like the universe had quietly straightened a picture frame. A week later, I got a letter from Caleb. Handwritten. The kid had his mother's handwriting, but my sarcasm. It said, "Dad, I don't know how to say this right. I'm sorry for believing everything she said. I should have called sooner. I'm proud of you. Maybe we can grab dinner." I stared at it for a long time. You spend so many years wanting payback that you forget what forgiveness looks like. That letter hit harder than the verdict. I called him immediately. "Dinner sounds good, kid. Just don't expect me to pay if you order lobster." He laughed, the first real laugh between us in a decade. The next Sunday, we met at a small grill near the marina. Caleb looked older, calmer. He hugged me awkwardly, the way grown sons do when they realize their dads aren't invincible but still somehow survive the apocalypse. "Mom's in jail," he said, half whispering, like it was still unbelievable. "I know," I said. "She'll be fine." Orange brings out her eyes. He tried not to laugh, failed. "You never change, huh?" "Oh, I've changed," I said, smiling. "I just did it my way." Over burgers and beer, we talked, really talked. About life, mistakes, the business, even basketball. For once, no guilt, no tension. Just two Merritts finding the middle ground between past and peace. When the bill came, he grabbed it. "My treat, Dad." I grinned. See? Miracles still happen. Later that night, walking along the pier, I realized the circle was complete. I'd lost everything: love, pride, reputation, and got it all back cleaner. The name Merritt meant something again. Not wealth, not power, but resilience. As I watched the waves hit the docks, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through a photo of Grandpa Henry. "You were right," I said softly. "Real wealth isn't flaunted. It's built to last." And this time, I wasn't just reclaiming my name. I was living up to it. If you'd told me a year ago I'd be running a nonprofit, I would have laughed so hard my pacemaker would have filed for early retirement. Me? The guy who used to calculate emotional value and ROI and see charity as tax strategy? Yeah, that guy. But that's the thing about losing everything. It rewires you. Turns greed into gratitude. Turns revenge into, okay, fine, philanthropic revenge. It started the day after the court verdict. I was back in my office at Merritt Movers, pretending to look productive, when Pat walked in, heels clicking like punctuation. "So," she said, dropping a stack of folders on my desk. "What's next for you, Mr. Redemption Arc?" I leaned back in my chair, smirking. I was thinking of writing a book. How to lose a marriage, a company, and still afford breakfast. She rolled her eyes. "Cute. But seriously, you've got money, power, a restored name. What are you going to do with it?" That question stuck like a splinter. I'd spent years climbing, fighting, clawing for control, and now that I had it back, I didn't know what to do with my hands. That night, I went home, poured a glass of bourbon, and opened Grandpa Henry's letter again. My eyes went straight to that one line. Don't waste pain. Invest it. Invest it. By morning, I had a plan. I called Wes first. "I want to start something," I said. "Something that helps people like me. Folks who got blindsided in divorce court, swindled by lawyers, chewed up by the system." He hummed thoughtfully. "So a foundation?" "Exactly. The Henry Merritt Foundation. Named after the man who left me both wisdom and 143 million reasons to do better." Wes chuckled. "Catchy. What's the mission?" "Simple. To make sure people like Clara and Julian never get away with this kind of crap again." "Ah," he said. "So not just charity. Retribution with paperwork." "Exactly," I said, grinning. "Justice, but make it tax deductible." Within a month, the foundation was official. I hired Pat as the legal director. She said she didn't do charity work, but I reminded her it came with a massive litigation budget and the chance to ruin sleazy lawyers legally. That sealed the deal. Nia came on as head of investigations. She showed up to her first day in a hoodie that said trust issues. I told her she was overdressed. Our first office wasn't fancy, just a floor in one of my smaller warehouses. But it buzzed with energy. Walls covered in case files, coffee cups everywhere, and a whiteboard that said in bold letters, "Karma equals compound interest." We started small, one case at a time. Our first client was a retired teacher named Mrs. Donnelly. Sweet woman, 70s, the kind of person who still sent handwritten thank you notes. Her ex-husband's lawyer had manipulated her into signing away her pension under complex financial clauses. Translation: legal theft. Pat took one look at the case and said, "I could win this in my sleep." "Good," I said, "because I plan to film it and use it as our first commercial." We took the case, and 2 weeks later, the lawyer in question retired suddenly. We won full restitution for Mrs. Donnelly. She cried. I pretended I didn't. Word spread fast. Next came a single mom who'd lost her house in a bogus property dispute, then a mechanic whose wife's attorney faked documents. Before long, we were flooded with calls. People wanted justice and free coffee, which we also provided. The media caught on, of course. Headlines popped up. Divorce victims find a hero in Merritt. From CEO to advocate, the man who fought back. Someone on Twitter called me the divorce avenger. I wasn't sure if that made me a hero or a cautionary tale, but I'll admit, it looked good on a mug. Meanwhile, the old Merritt Movers board tried crawling back. A few of them, the ones who'd sided with Clara and Julian, showed up uninvited. "Lucas," one of them said, all smiles, "great to see you back on top. We knew you'd bounce back." I leaned forward across the conference table. "Did you, Jim? Because last I checked, you voted to replace me with the guy who turned my company into a money-laundering drive-through." He chuckled awkwardly. "Water under the bridge." "Funny," I said. "I sold the bridge. They didn't come back. At home, I found peace in small things. The new place wasn't grand, a small modern house by the beach. I'd wake up early, brew real coffee, and watch the sunrise over the waves. It felt human. For decades I'd chased status. Now I chase quiet. And peace, for once, didn't feel like failure. Caleb started visiting every Sunday. He'd show up with a six-pack and that look of cautious hope. We'd grill, watch basketball, talk about everything but the past. One evening, he said, "Dad, Mom's written me. From prison." I sipped my beer. "Let me guess. She's suddenly found religion?" He smiled sadly. "She says she's sorry." I nodded. "Maybe she is. But sorry doesn't pay emotional damages." He laughed. "You'd make a terrible therapist." "Thank you," I said. Eventually, he joined the foundation too. Not as a lawyer, not as a manager, just as a guy who wanted to help. He handled outreach, community events, mentoring programs. Watching him work, I realized something strange. Forgiveness sneaks up on you. It doesn't come from sympathy. It comes from seeing the next generation do better. The foundation grew faster than I expected. Within a year, we had offices in 3 cities, a network of volunteer attorneys, and enough funding to scare a few politicians. Pat even joked about running for office. "If I ever do," she said, "I'm making you my PR manager." "Please don't," I said. "I'm allergic to honesty tests." One day, we got a letter from a woman named Erica. Her husband's attorney had stolen her settlement funds and vanished. It was the same lawyer who'd once worked under Julian Ward. Full circle. Pat read the letter, looked up at me, and said, "Want to handle this one personally?" "Oh, absolutely." We built the case, found the missing attorney, and handed his entire operation to the IRS with a bow on top. Watching the news that night, seeing his office raided, his smug grin replaced with a mugshot, I felt that same electric satisfaction I'd felt the night of Clara's arrest. Revenge? Maybe. But this time it wasn't about me. It was about balance. At our 1-year anniversary gala, we held an event. Not in a mansion, not in a ballroom, but in the same community center where Mrs. Donnelly volunteered. Dozens of clients came, each with their own story. The foundation banner hung behind us, and I gave a speech I didn't rehearse. When I started this journey, I said, I thought revenge was the point. Turns out, restoration is better. Pain's just the tax we pay for growth. And if you pay it long enough, you start earning interest. The crowd laughed, clapped, some even cried. Afterward, an old man came up and shook my hand. "You're doing good work," he said. "Your grandpa would be proud." That one got me. Back at my office later that night, I poured myself a small drink and stared at the photo on my desk, me, Grandpa Henry, and a truck with the old Merritt Movers logo. Underneath it, a quote he'd written once. "Every man deserves a comeback, but only the wise earn one." I raised my glass. Here's to wisdom, eventually acquired. Earl called that night, his voice booming through the phone. "Saw your face on TV again, Moneybags." You're practically Oprah with better hair. I laughed. I'll take that as a compliment. Seriously, man, he said, you did it. You turned disaster into destiny. Yeah, I said. Guess the trick is to fail hard and come back harder. When we hung up, I stepped outside. The night air was crisp, the ocean humming like a low secret. My life, once wreckage, was now structure again, patched up with humor, built on faith, sealed with irony. The Henry Merritt Foundation wasn't just a business or a charity. It was proof. Proof that even after your name's dragged, your heart's broken, and your fortune's stolen, you can rise, rebuild, and do it better. Grandpa had called it wealth that lasts. I finally understood what he meant. As I looked out at the moonlight over the water, I whispered, "Thanks, old man. You saved me from myself." And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel haunted by my past. I felt guided by it. Because Merritts don't just move things anymore. We move forward. A year after the chaos, my life finally felt like it belonged to me again. No lawyers, no courtroom drama, no paparazzi pretending I mattered. Just mornings by the beach, a mug of strong coffee, and peace that didn't come with a price tag. That, and the occasional reminder that karma has a better sense of humor than I ever did. I got a letter from Clara one morning. Prison stationery, neat handwriting, long paragraphs of "I've changed" and "Julian was toxic, and maybe one day we can talk." I read it twice, once for content, once for comedy, then folded it neatly and placed it in the recycling bin. Redemption's great, but some chapters don't need sequels. Caleb visits every Sunday now. He brings coffee, steals half my snacks, and insists on fixing my Wi-Fi even though it works fine. We've gotten good at laughing again, the kind of laughter that doesn't need to hide pain behind it. Last weekend, he told me, "Dad, you know you're trending again? Some influencer posted a video calling you the comeback king of karma." I grinned. Finally, a title I didn't have to fight a lawyer for. The Henry Merritt Foundation's thriving. Pat runs the legal division like a general with a caffeine addiction, and Nia still scares half our interns, in the best way. Every week, new cases roll in. People broken by betrayal, clawing their way back. And every win feels personal, like Grandpa's whispering. That's the way. Some nights, I sit on the porch, look out at the ocean, and think about the wild ride it took to get here. From a courtroom nobody believed in me, to a gala where justice danced in handcuffs, to this quiet peace that finally makes sense. Funny thing is, I don't dream of revenge anymore. I dream of laughter, big, unashamed, gut-deep laughter that belongs to a man who made it through the fire and came out sipping coffee on the other side. People ask how I did it, how I survived the storm. I always give the same answer. Compound interest, good lawyers, and bad exes. But the truth? It wasn't about money or justice. It was about remembering who I was before bitterness took over. About rebuilding, not just my empire, but my spine. And if Claire is watching from her cell, well, I hope she sees me smiling. Because that's the real victory. So here's my toast to the ending, and to every beginning disguised as one. To second chances. To karma. To coffee stronger than regret. And to the best punchline of all. I didn't just get the last laugh. I earned it.